Life can change in the most unexpected ways, even on a rainy night, with a simple knock at the door. This is a story about loneliness, connection, and how a chance encounter can spark something extraordinary. Stay tuned until the end for a twist you won't see coming. If you enjoy captivating stories like this, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next tale. Friday nights used to mean something different for me. At 29, they had become a quiet routine. A glass of wine in hand, aimlessly scrolling through dating apps that felt more like work than fun, wondering where time had gone. My small apartment in Seattle was cozy yet filled with a kind of emptiness that only grew louder on nights like this. Most of my friends were either married or busy raising kids. In the meantime, I found myself ordering takeout because cooking for one seemed like a pointless reminder of what I didn't have. Life wasn't bad. I had a decent job, enough freedom, and an apartment I could call my own. But there was a nagging feeling, a sense that I had let time slip by, leaving behind dreams I didn't even know I had. That night, the rain poured relentlessly, drumming against the windows like it wanted in. It mirrored my mood, somber and heavy. Then a knock at the door. It was so soft I almost missed it over the storm's noise. Grabbing my cardigan, I shuffled over and opened the door. There, standing drenched to the bone, was the delivery guy. He looked no older than 24, with dark hair plastered to his forehead and rainwater dripping from his uniform. His jacket clung to him, soaked through, and he shivered as he clutched the pizza box like it was a lifeline. "Rough night?" I asked, feeling a pang of sympathy for him. He managed a faint smile, his teeth chattering. "You could say that." Before I could think too hard about it, I found myself saying, "Come inside. You'll catch your death out there." He hesitated but eventually stepped into the warmth of my apartment, careful not to drip too much on the floor. I handed him a towel and gestured toward the bathroom. "Dry off a bit." "You can't go back out like that," I insisted. He looked at me, his expression a mix of gratitude and surprise, before nodding and disappearing into the bathroom. As he closed the door, I rummaged through my closet and found a hoodie and a pair of sweatpants my younger cousin had left behind during his last visit. They weren't fancy, but they'd do the job. When I returned, the bathroom door was ajar, and steam wafted into the hallway. I paused, hand raised to knock, when I heard the faint rustling of fabric. The sound of wet clothes being peeled off made me freeze. I felt a flush creep up my neck as I caught a brief glimpse of his reflection in the mirror. A fleeting image of bare skin and vulnerability. My heart thudded in my chest and I quickly looked away, embarrassed at my own reaction. When he emerged moments later, dressed in the oversized hoodie and sweatpants, his face softened into a small, grateful smile. "Thanks. This is really kind of you," he said, running a hand through his damp hair. I waved it off, though my cheeks burned. "No big deal. Sit down, warm up." We sat in silence for a while, the storm outside a constant backdrop. The air between us shifted, subtle but noticeable. I busied myself in the kitchen, pretending to make tea just to have something to do. As I stretched to reach a mug on the top shelf, I suddenly felt him behind me. I hadn't heard him approach, but the warmth of his presence was unmistakable. "Need a hand?" he asked, his voice soft but close enough to make my pulse quicken. I turned, startled, and nearly dropped the mug. His hand shot out to steady mine, his fingers brushing against mine for a fleeting moment. The touch sent a jolt through me and I froze, acutely aware of how close we were. "Thanks," I murmured, unable to meet his gaze. But he didn't step away. Instead, his hand lingered just a moment longer than necessary, and when I finally looked up, I found his eyes locked on mine. The intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. "I should, get the tea," I stammered, pulling away and turning to the counter. He stepped back, giving me space, but the air between us remained charged. I poured the tea with shaky hands and handed him a cup. His fingers brushed mine again as he took it. This time I didn't pull away. The next hour blurred into quiet conversation, the storm outside making the moment feel even more isolated from the rest of the world. He told me his name, Ethan, and shared a little about his life. Part-time delivery work while trying to figure out what he wanted to do next. I didn't pry, and neither did he. But the tension from earlier lingered. An unspoken presence that neither of us admitted outright. It wasn't until I stood to clear the mugs that it finally spilled over. As I turned, Ethan was closer than I had expected. His hand reached out, brushing my arm, and I froze. He hesitated for a moment, searching my face for any sign of hesitation. When he found none, he leaned in, his lips brushing mine in a tentative kiss. It wasn't hurried or desperate, but it carried a quiet intensity that made my knees weak. My hands moved instinctively, finding their way to his chest, and I felt the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath my palms. The kiss deepened. He pulled me closer, his arms wrapping around me as if afraid to let go. For the first time in years I felt seen. Not just as a person but as someone worth holding on to. The kiss left me breathless, my pulse racing as Ethan's arms tightened around me. For a moment the world outside faded, the storm, the lingering doubts, the emptiness I had grown so used to. All that remained was this moment, electric and undeniable. When we pulled apart, his forehead rested lightly against mine, his warm breath brushing my cheek. Neither of us spoke. Words felt unnecessary. Instead, we stood there, caught in the stillness, as if moving would break whatever spell had been cast between us. Whatever fragile spell had been cast, the moment didn't last. I stepped back, suddenly overwhelmed by the intensity of what had just happened. I should clean up, I murmured, gesturing vaguely toward the counter. Ethan's eyes searched mine, concern flickering across his face. If this is too much. No, I interrupted, my voice firmer than I expected. It's not that. It's just. I trailed off, unable to articulate the storm of emotions swirling inside me. He nodded, understanding without me needing to explain. I'll wait, he said softly, taking a seat on the couch. I busied myself in the kitchen, wiping down counters that didn't need cleaning and rearranging the mugs on the shelf. But my mind kept drifting back, to the feeling of his lips on mine, the warmth of his touch, and the way he looked at me like I mattered. When I finally turned back to the living room, Ethan was sitting there, his elbows resting on his knees as he stared out at the rain streaking the window. He looked younger in that moment, almost vulnerable, and something in my chest tightened. Sorry about that, I said, sitting down beside him. You don't have to apologize, he replied, turning to face me. If anything, I should thank you for letting me in tonight. For everything. His sincerity caught me off guard. Before I could stop myself, I reached out, placing my hand on his. I don't do this kind of thing often, I admitted. Or ever really. Neither do I, he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. Guess we're both out of our comfort zones. We sat in silence for a while, the tension between us shifting into something softer, more familiar. Eventually, I leaned back, resting my head against the couch as exhaustion from the day began to creep in. Ethan shifted beside me, and before I realized what was happening, he had leaned in, his lips brushing my temple in a gesture so gentle it nearly undid me. You look tired, he murmured. I am, I admitted. But I don't want you to leave just yet. I wasn't planning on it, he said, his voice steady and reassuring. As the hour stretched on, the conversation flowed easily between us. We talked about everything and nothing, the kind of conversation that feels effortless, as if you've known the other person forever. Ethan opened up about his struggles with finding direction in life, and I shared pieces of my own journey, the moments of doubt and loneliness that had brought me to where I was now. Somewhere between the laughter and the quiet moments, I realized how much I enjoyed having him here. It was more than the physical connection. It was the sense of being understood, of being seen. When the clock struck midnight, the storm outside began to wane, the rain easing into a soft drizzle. Ethan glimpsed at the time and sighed. I should probably head out. Don't want to overstay my welcome. You're not, I said quickly, the words tumbling out before I could think them through. But if you need to go, I understand. He hesitated, his gaze lingering on mine. What if I didn't want to go? He asked quietly. My breath hitched, and for a moment I couldn't find the words. Then, stay, I said finally. If you want to stay. The night unfolded slowly, every moment feeling more deliberate, more intimate. We moved to the bedroom, where the dim light cast long shadows across the walls. There, beneath the covers, we shed the last of our reservations, our movements unhurried but charged with a quiet urgency. It wasn't just about the physical connection. It was about the unspoken understanding that we both needed this. Needed each other. His touch was gentle, his kisses deliberate, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt whole. When it was over, we lay tangled together. His arm draped over me as the first light of dawn began to creep through the curtains. I closed my eyes, savoring the warmth of his body against mine and the steady rhythm of his breathing. The next morning the world felt different. The storm had passed, leaving behind a crisp, clear sky. Ethan was still asleep when I slipped out of bed, pulling on a robe and heading to the kitchen. I brewed a pot of coffee, the aroma filling the apartment as I replayed the events of the night before in my mind. By the time Ethan emerged, dressed in the clothes I'd lent him, a shy smile playing on his lips, 2 mugs of coffee were already waiting on the counter. "Morning," Ethan said, his voice still rough with sleep. "Morning," I replied, sliding a mug toward him. We sipped our coffee in comfortable silence, the weight of the night before lingering between us. When he finally put his mug down, he looked at me with a seriousness that caught me off guard. "Thank you," he said, "for everything." "You don't have to thank me," I said softly. "I think I needed this as much as you did." He nodded, his gaze dropping to his mug. "I should probably get going," he said after a moment, though he didn't move. "Will I see you again?" I asked, my voice betraying the vulnerability I felt. Ethan looked up, a small smile tugging at his lips. "If you want to." "I do," I said, surprising even myself with the certainty in my voice. When he finally left, the apartment felt quieter than before, but not in the same lonely way. There was a sense of possibility now, a spark of hope I hadn't felt in a long time. As I stood by the window watching him disappear down the street, I couldn't help but smile. Maybe this was just the beginning. As the door clicked shut behind Ethan, I stood there for a moment, staring at the space where he had just been. The quiet wasn't lonely anymore. It was full of something new. Hope. Maybe for the first time in a long time, I realized my life didn't have to stay the way it was. This rainy night had reminded me that connection wasn't just a dream. It was possible. All it took was one small, unexpected moment to change everything. As I turned back to the kitchen, I smiled and grabbed my phone, ready to order another pizza. Who knows? Maybe the next knock at the door would hold something just as unexpected. What did you think of this story? Did it surprise you or resonate with you in some way? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this tale of unexpected connection, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that explore the beautiful, messy parts of life. Let's keep the conversation going.